So, hello everybody. Today we are going to see the reading from this unit 4.4. Lastly, we had completed till check your progress 2. Now we will see different standards for documentation. So, this software documentation standard is used in the organization for uniform practices for documentation preparation, interpretation, change, and revision to ensure the inclusion of essential requirements of different standards. Sometimes documentation as per various standards is stated in the contractual agreement between the software vendor and the customer. This standard will also aid in the use and analysis of the system or subsystem and its software documentation during the system/software life cycle of a software project. Documentation comes in many forms, example specifications, reports, files, descriptions, plans, source code listings, change requests, etc., and can be in electronic or paper form. The documentation standard defines various aspects of documentation, such as style, format, and the document revision or change process of these documents. The international standards ISO or IEC 12207 software life cycle process describes documentation as one of the supporting parallel process of software development process. It may be noted that this standard is not documentation standard, but it describes the process of documentation during the software development process. The following are other documentation standards. Number 1, ISO/IEC 18019 Guidelines for the design and preparation of user documentation for application software. This standard describes how to establish what information user needs, how to determine the way in which that information should be presented to the user, and then how to prepare the information and make it available. It covers both online and printed documentation. It describes standard format and style to be adopted for documentation. It gives principles and recommended practices for documentation. Number 2, ISO/IEC 15910 Software User Documentation Process. This standard specifies the minimum process for creating user documentation for software that has a user interface, including printed documentation, example, user manuals, online documentation, help text, and online documentation systems. IEEE 1063 Software User Documentation. It provides minimum requirement for structure, information, content, and format for user documentation. It does not describe the process to be adopted for documentation. It is applicable for both printed and online documentation. Components of software user documentation as described in IEEE 1063 Software User Documentation. Components of software user documentation: identification data, example, title page, table of contents, list of illustrations. Introduction for use of the documentation, such as description of software, etc. Concept of operations procedures. Information on software commands, error messages, and problem resolution. Glossary to make the reader acquainted with unfamiliar terms. Navigational features in related information sources. Index search capability for electronic document. Documentation involves recording of information generated during the process of software development lifecycle. Documentation process involves planning, designing, developing, Distributing and maintaining documents. During planning phase, documents to be produced during the process of software development are identified. For each document, following items are addressed: name of the document, purpose, target audience, process to develop, review, produce, design, and maintain. The following form part of activities related to documentation of development phase. All documents to be designed in accordance with applicable documentation standards for proper formats, content description, page number, figure/table, source and accuracy of input data for documents should be confirmed. Use of tools for automated document generation. The document prepared should be of proper format, technical content, and style should be in accordance to documentation standards. Production of the document should be carried out as per the drawn plan. Production may be in either printed form or electronic form. Master copy of the document is to be retained for future reference. Maintenance. As the software changes, the relevant documents are required to be modified. Document must reflect all such changes accordingly. So here we come to the end of this lecture. Until then, keep enjoying.